Hey guys, we are in an information war. We are involved in information warfare, and China wants to build portfolios, connect the dots, and collect as much information as possible on Americans and utilize and harness the power of our computer systems for their own nefarious purposes. And that's a fact. And if you've been watching at all, what's been happening on Capitol Hill and the investigations into TikTok, then you'll know this. It's a reason why, actually, this is kind of interesting. When I was in Washington, D.C., and I went to CPAC, my daughter was with me. So I brought my daughter with me. And of course, you know, she doesn't care who's in that room. Like, she's not even like in astonishment or starstruck by anybody back there. So she's on her phone, of course. And she's talking to her dad, and then she's talking to a friend. And then all of a sudden, I hear one of my friends come up behind Annalise and say, "Annalise, are you on TikTok?" And I was like, "What?" I raised my head like, wait a minute. We're not allowed to have TikTok in our family on any of our phones. And what happens is that your kids, right, of course, are, chatting with their friends, and their friends send them a link to something funny that's on TikTok, because every kid in America happens to have TikTok. And then they're clicking on it, and TikTok allows you to view that. If you download it, you don't actually have to become like a TikTok person. You don't have to sign up for it. You can actually see it as long as it's downloaded. Why? Because they want to get access to your phone. Well, this is one of the major honeypots of America, right? I'm going to tell you a little bit about honeypotting in the intelligence community. A honey trap or a honeypot is basically the art of seduction. It's putting a spy in a perfect position, in a perfect place, to collect information from somebody who is unsuspecting, somebody who doesn't realize that the person that they're talking to is a spy. So TikTok is pretty much like that. It's the biggest honey trap. It's the American honeypot, right? But I've actually had experiences with the actual intelligence honeypot. Not me personally. I don't think I've been honeypotted, unless that's my husband and he's lying to me. But that's the only one that could have been the honey trap for me, or the honeypot. But I've actually, in my coverage of intelligence and the intelligence community and being in the war zones, have seen this at play. This honey trap, this honey pot. And I actually wrote a story about it, one that dealt with Patrick Byrne and Maria Butina from Russia, the former Overstock CEO, who is recently on my podcast. I broke a few stories on him and the relationship that he had with Maria Butina, and all of the curious spying that possibly went on there. And I've also kind of experienced that myself. And I will tell you all about that in a few minutes, but I want to show you this. This was 2011. I love books. And so I never get rid of my books. Not really, not if I love them. And this is Henry Kissinger's book on, guess what? On China. It's on China. And when I get back, I'm going to tell you my experience with a Chinese journalist who I believe at this dinner, I saved the menu right here, in 2011, was trying to get access to me. Certainly not honeypot me, because I don't think she was going in that direction. But I'll definitely fill you in on what happens when you're working in Washington, D.C., and you're covering stories and you have access. Access is what is important there. And we have a very special guest coming on, my friend. He's been on the show before, and somebody who I think everyone finds completely fascinating and interesting. Former head of intelligence for Guatemala, Mario Duarte. And he'll be with us in a few seconds. Hey, folks, gold and silver allow you to protect what you've worked so hard for. And I think you're seeing what's happening right now across the globe, right? Whether it's banking systems failing, small banks failing, big banks trying to, do what to bail them out. And we've also seen what's happened in the United States, right? I mean, what does it mean? What does it all mean? What does the money mean? If we're creating a system that's just going to keep imploding on itself. And I think that's why Allegiance Gold is so important and why you need to diversify. You absolutely have to diversify your funds. And Allegiance Gold will let you do that. And right now you can get $5,000 of free silver on a qualifying purchase when you tell them that Sara sent you. You just got to tell them Sara sent you. So my friends at Allegiance Gold can help protect your IRA, your 401k with physical gold and silver. And guess what? They'll deliver it securely right to your front door. And they'll educate you on all the benefits of owning physical gold because they care and they want to help build a relationship with you. By the way, Allegiance Gold has the highest ratings in the industry. It's 5 stars with TrustLink AAA. It's AAA rated with the Business Consumer Alliance and actually has an A+ with the Better Business Bureau. Get $5,000 of free silver on a qualifying purchase when you tell them that Sara sent you. So don't wait, call or click today. 877-702-7272. That's 877-702-SARA, SARA, or go to protectwithsara.com. That's protectwithsara.com. We can't control the Biden administration, folks, but we can prepare. 877-702-7272. That's 877-702-SARA, SARA, or protectwithsara.com. So let's talk a little bit about information. Why is information so important? And as a journalist, it's everything, right? I remember, I'm going to take you guys way back. When I was first covering the war in Afghanistan, one of the places I had gone to when I was in the United States was Fort Huachuca. And at the time, General Maples was head of the DIA, the Defense Intelligence Agency. And I was invited to go to the DIA. There was a lot of commotion on Capitol Hill about, I think many of you will remember, is how we interrogated our Al-Qaeda captors, right? Did we waterboard them? How we interrogated them, the CIA versus, the Army. And the Army had a different way of interrogations. And General Maples at the time, he went on his almighty high horse and, he had a right. I mean, there was a different way of interrogation and saying, look, waterboarding, these type of actions are wrong. What we do here is collect information. So even if it takes us a month or 2 months, we're going to get that information that we need from our captors. And so I went to Fort Huachuca and was briefed on how that all takes place, like how you interrogate a captor, what the Army was doing to ensure that these interrogations lived up to Geneva Convention, that they didn't cross any standards, that they upheld human rights conditions, right? So that's one way of gathering information. You capture your enemy or the person you suspect is going to do something, and then you interrogate them, you question them, you find different techniques. Is the guy attracted to young women? Does he like a man? Does she, is she more attracted to a grandfatherly type? I mean, there's all kinds of methodology that goes into how am I going to access information from this person? And as a journalist covering the intelligence community, that was always fascinating to me. Now, on the other hand, you get Ayman al-Zawahiri, right? Like the second in command of Al-Qaeda, or you get somebody who you think is going to have actionable intelligence like Khalid Sheikh Mohammed. And maybe you think oh my gosh, there's going to be an attack the next day on the United States of America. How am I going to get information from this guy quickly and swiftly? What is going to motivate him? And that's where you go into all the kind of TV shows like 24 or Homeland, or, the Jason Bourne, where you're thinking those are all over exaggerated, of course, but where you're thinking of okay, does this guy is he going to be motivated by pain? Right? I'm guessing, or will he be motivated by threats to his family or something? How am I going to get the information to stop an attack? Well, there's also other ways of gathering information, and it's long-term information gathering. And that is, really is the art of seduction, the honeypot. and intelligence agencies. And we're going to talk to Mario Duarte a little bit about this, because I think I'm going to have to bring him back on about, there's so many things I want to touch on with him. But part of what I think is important is like understanding that this is happening all over the world, right? That these honey traps or honey pots are happening from Israel Mossad to, the United States, maybe CIA, to intelligence agencies in Central America, China. I mean, people want information. And information and resources really are your most valuable asset. Why do you think the Chinese, and then I'm going to go to the American side, right? We're going to talk about that too. But why do you think the Chinese are working so proficiently at gathering information off of our cell phones, right? They want everything they can get. Like if they can target my phone, wow, right? Or someone else's phone, wow, look at all the information they can get. A politician, somebody with access, somebody with connections, right? And TikTok also allows them to collect data and data mine on every single person that you can imagine. I mean, Patrick Byrne was even saying that top Chinese officials, and he worked for a long time in China. He's the former CEO of Overstock. I interviewed him on my previous podcast recently. If you haven't heard it, you need to listen to it. It's fantastic. But Patrick talked about the fact that, the Chinese government's already divvied up the United States between its most senior officials. Like, hey, once we take over the US, I get Barbara Streisand's house. Or wait a minute, maybe you take Barbara Streisand's house and I will get, Brad Pitt's house up on the hill, or Chris Rock's, whoever. They're divvying it up. They've already divvied it up. They've got their own deeds. Isn't that fun to think about? Well, when I was, and I'm going to go into the book right now, when I was in DC and the very beginnings of my career, so to speak, I was traveling to the war zone already like 3 years. Actually, I'd been working quite a long time by the time this luncheon came about. It was a luncheon with Henry Kissinger in 2011. And it was about his book on China. And it was with the Greater Washington Board of Trade. And it was like their kind of annual luncheon meeting. And I had been invited. And I thought, wow, how fascinating. I'm so excited. I want to go see Kissinger speak. And by the way, this is a phenomenal book. But I went to go see him speak. And I was sitting at a table. I was working then for the Washington Times. And I was sitting at a table, or maybe I was with the Examiner then. Can't really quite remember. I'll think about it for a second. But I was sitting there at a table, and lo and behold, a Chinese reporter, she came and sat next to me, a young Chinese reporter, and she said, "Oh my goodness, you're Sara Carter. I'm so excited to meet you. I see your coverage all the time, and she was super nice. See your coverage all the time in Afghanistan, Iraq." It was like she knew me. It's like, wow, I was so flattered. Oh, you're reading my stories at the Washington Times and at the Washington Examiner. I'm sure I was there already. And we were talking, and out comes our dinner, which is like all kinds of delicious things, apparently. I can't remember, but it was, pan roasted salmon with green beans and acorn squash and all that yummy stuff they serve in Washington, D.C. And the next thing you know, she's like, "Can I have your email address? Could I have your number?" I gave her my email address, but I think I was already, big red flags started sticking up during this conversation. And she was asking me to come to China with her. And you should come to China. You should cover stories in Beijing. And I'm like, wow, I don't even speak Mandarin. Why would you want me to go to China? I would be like, other than the fact that I do love Chinese food. I absolutely, yes. But the real Chinese food, not like, I don't want the, thick, gooey wonton stuff. I don't like that. I like the dim sum. I love it with like the rice. I love it spicy. It's delicious. Other than that, I don't know why anybody would want me to cover stories in China. I wouldn't even, know where to start. I just, I try to stay in this hemisphere as much as possible and in war zones. So, and where I grew up in the Middle East. But it started to occur to me that she was laying out, she may have sincerely wanted to be my friend, but she was certainly not just a reporter. She already knew a lot about me. She had spotted me. She had come and asked to sit next to me, and she ate dinner at that lunch and ate lunch with me at that table. And certainly this happens all the time in Washington, D.C. And it even happens overseas. And I'll tell you a couple of interesting stories, just really quick. I think they're just so incredible. Like, first of all, I went on a trip. I was in Singapore, and it was during the summit. And the makeup lady that was there during the summit, we had all been warned at Fox. Everybody at Fox, everybody who was going there, whether you were with the United States government, whether you were a journalist, whether you were traveling there for some other purpose, had already been told, look, the summit that was happening under the Trump administration in Singapore, the Singapore summit, with North Korea, that summit was going to be an epic spying game. Epic. Like Russians, Chinese, everybody that you can imagine, every nation state that wanted to gather intelligence on Kim Jong-un, on President Trump, on whatever world leaders were attending the summit, they would be doing it. Do not go with your regular cell phones. Do not take your laptops. It's at your own risk. They will collect everything. And they were hitting from all angles, right? I brought a brand new laptop. I had a new cell phone. And that really, truly was what was happening. So everybody was aware that they were going to be spied on. And there was this really beautiful makeup lady, and there was a gentleman who had come to do a little guest segment, on the show and everything. And I just remember how it was so funny because she was so flirtatious with this person. So flirtatious with them when she was doing the makeup, talking about like, oh, I saw you while you were swimming and you look very physically fit. And I just thought, wow, this woman is just going for broke, to this guest that was going to be on one of the shows. And I couldn't believe it. And then all of a sudden it started to occur to me when I talked to this person afterwards, and they were like, oh, for sure, that's a honeypot. That was just, they were trying, they were fishing. That's what they do. Fishing. That's what spies do. They fish for resources and information. And it's happening all the time. And this is what China is doing. China is very much so, and Russia, working, these are our adversaries, to collect information from us, to control us, to the point where, and I don't know if you've been watching the hearings, but I am astonished at the fact that the Chinese would rather see TikTok just disappear than to allow the United States to have access to TikTok, than to sell it. Because China is collecting information on us. And TikTok's CEO pretty much admitted that on Capitol Hill. And this is what happens when we become unaware, right? Think about what China's doing in Central America. We're going to talk to Mario about this. Think about how the Chinese are utilizing our failed border system. Think about how, as an adversary, they have targeted our youth with fentanyl and xylazine and pumping chemicals and counterfeit pills into our system, collecting data off of our children. Guess what? While your children are alone in their rooms or on their phones at dinner, or I hope not, but in the living room or whatever, China is collecting information off of them. We are literally being taken advantage of 24/7. Our nation has pretty much given up, in a sense, its basic security. And what is that? Information. Because what is information? It's pure power, folks. It's pure power. Remember when I said I was going to just touch on what happens in the United States? Think about what happened after President Trump was elected and the whole Russia hoax, and how I broke all those stories and how I was collecting that information and trying to connect the dots. Well, that's what China's doing. China's trying to connect the dots. It's trying to figure us out. It's looking for our weakness, and it's exploiting us. It's exploiting our children. It understands. Do you think the Chinese allow their children to surf the internet the way we do, that the Chinese government allows them to utilize the internet in the same way? Oh, no. Oh, no, it's not. It's not the same way at all. And by the way, they're collecting it. And for all of you out there that think this is an over exaggeration, that is what the Chinese government wants you to believe. That is what they want you to believe, because they are the Trojan horse, right? This is what is happening in our world today, that we have become so compromised, but we can't even see it. We're just so busy. We're doing so much. We're not even seeing the forest through the trees. We're putting our children's lives in danger and our nation in danger. And even though, yes, the art of the honeypot has existed forever, and the Red Sparrow of Russia, and, Maria Butina, and, Patrick Byrne and poor Maria Butina, but she also probably, according to Patrick, was a victim of the whole thing. She's now back in Russia. But this game of espionage goes far beyond what we ever imagined. And just like me, my first, what I assumed was a real experience with a spy trying to, befriend me and get me to talk and maybe try to get me to go to Beijing. I've also, you don't really realize it when it's happening to you, because it all seems so natural. It all seems like just a part of, everyday conversation or everyday life, which is the reason why so many people are caught off guard, which is the reason why we need to wake up, which is the reason why I am continually focused on the issues that I believe affect our nation the most. And one of those is our adversary, and it's China. And we need to keep our eyes open and our ears peeled, because, folks, we are in one really dangerous situation now. And I can't wait to get Mario on the line to talk about it, because I think you're just going to get so much from him. But first, Donors Trust. And I'm going to tell you, here is an organization, folks, that not only do I love, they sponsor the show, but they are there for you. They're there for conservative values. So you're never going to have to worry about, like, did I give my money to an organization that's going to misuse it? You're going to give your money. And by the way, you're going to retain your privacy with Donors Trust by giving them the opportunity to invest it for you and to share with you where that money is being invested. Let me tell you about this, because this is great. Whether it's saving unborn babies, empowering entrepreneurs to offer alternatives to failing public schools, or fighting green energy extremists that want to consolidate power, Donors Trust is the charitable giving account provider for you. Let my friends at Donors Trust help minimize your tax liability while maximizing your giving. Visit www.donorstrust.org/Sara, S-A-R-A. That's www.donorstrust.org/Sara, S-A-R-A. Again, that's www.donorstrust.org/Sara. If you enjoy spy hijinks and intelligence agency scheming, subscribe to my channel here on Rumble and YouTube for all my stories and wild adventures. Thank you. As you all know out there, I spend a lot of time focused on China. I focus on Central America, our Western hemisphere. And there's a reason for that, because I do believe that the United States is probably under the greatest threat it has faced in a long time. And that is coming from our adversaries like China, like President Xi Jinping, who see an opening right now at targeting the United States, particularly bringing the United States down a level, like on a geopolitical level, is what I'm talking about, in order to establish itself, to establish China as the main player, as the dominant player in world global affairs. And that affects us how? It affects us in every which way. We saw what happened to our nation under COVID with the lockdowns for 2 years. Now the FBI director admits, obviously, President Trump knew that, and he knew that because I believe he was briefed a number of times on this, but that the COVID virus actually came from the Wuhan labs. And we're seeing more and more China, through its Belt and Road Initiative, move deeper into other parts of the world, in particular, Central America. And we not only see the effects of this with the narco trade, where we're seeing precursor chemicals coming from China into Mexico, and the cartels utilizing those chemicals to, of course, create fentanyl. But we're also seeing China expand its capabilities, its spying capabilities, its satellite and technology capabilities, its military capabilities, and its outreach. What seems like maybe a gesture of kindness, or a gesture of a foreign policy gesture with our neighbors here in our hemisphere. We promise to build you infrastructure. Chinese are promising to build roads. They're spending billions and billions of dollars throughout Latin America. And all of these loans come with a price. And we're also watching Russia and what Russia is doing, and how right now there are reports that Russian nuclear submarines, this is coming from the command, from Northern Command, that Russian nuclear submarines could possibly be in our shores, and sometimes they already are, by the way, but could possibly be stationed right on our shores of the United States. And that is a huge concern within the next 2 years. This is why I have my very good friend and somebody who I've spent a lot of time with on the ground in Guatemala, here in the United States. I plan on visiting Guatemala again very soon, hopefully for the upcoming elections in June for the new presidency. I have Mario Duarte with me. Mario, it's so great to have you on the Sara Carter Show. I'm so happy that we can talk like this, even though you're so far away from me.
Hi, Sarah, and hello to all of your listeners and to our fellow Texans. Yeah.
That's right. And for all of you out there who have not heard Mario before, he's been on previous podcasts. I want you to kind of get an idea of, he's not only a brilliant, brilliant man, and understands the political system better than anyone I know, especially in Central America, but he is also the former secretary of intelligence for Guatemala. He's also a U.S. Army veteran, and of course, a Texan, a Tejano. And that's why I just have so much respect for you, Mario, and for just the diversity. I don't think people realize, like, I've had people say to me, how can he be the Secretary of Intelligence for Guatemala and a U.S. Army veteran?
What?
They're always confused by that. And I say, well, no, that happens quite often. Like, people don't realize that in
Yeah,
foreign
we
affairs, right?
Texans get a lot of leeway all over the world. We know how to do things. So, countries better be careful before we start taking over all over, the entire continental U.S.
That's right. Well, I only wish we could. I feel like we're losing our strength here in the Western Hemisphere, especially as a republic and as a democracy. You and I talk about this a lot, and you know how seriously concerned I am about this, but we see China, we see other adversaries making headway here in the Western Hemisphere. And I also feel like, to a large extent, the US government has really failed in certain aspects of its foreign policy in our own hemisphere. We should be the envy of the world. We shouldn't have to be fighting off the cartels the way we are with our neighbors. We should be working together to bring prosperity to all of our nations. Where did this all go wrong?
I think, unfortunately, the current administration, has this weird vision for foreign policy, mainly led by their own ideologies and their pet projects, not serious political and geopolitical objectives. And what you said, we're not losing the United States only influence in the Western Hemisphere, but all over the world. Now, a lot of people, people in need still want to immigrate to the United States, but serious people and countries are looking at the United States like, this is a joke. I mean, what kind of country is it? It's now the United Banana Republic. What is it?
Right.
Because really, I mean, with all the people currently in positions of influence and power all over the bureaucracy of the United States, you have a lot of academics that have never held a serious job in their life, and a lot of partisans that all they know what to do is push their own agendas and ideological projects down the throats of smaller countries, and that's exactly what a aristocracy of sorts, because you have the worst type of people, ideologues, mediocre people that have been pushed up the ladder just because they are someone's friend, or they are, unfortunately, because of their race or their sexual preference, when the United States has been a beacon of example when it comes to professionalism and doing good and all these things. And now we have all these mediocre people leading our foreign policy.
Right. What went through your mind? What were you hearing? Because I was talking to folks, to friends of mine overseas, that could not even believe or fathom why the Biden administration had Sam Britton, the transgendered man, or the cross-dressing man that was stealing luggage, as head of its nuclear waste program. Like, even if he had a degree in nuclear waste, like, nobody could conceptualize why the Biden administration would do that. And then, of course, every other equitable role that they tried to fill in this administration, it was almost as if, the way I heard it from other people, it was almost as if the United States was embarrassing itself publicly. Like, they couldn't figure out what this administration was trying to do
You know,
with that.
and that's the worst part of it all, because they are just grabbing people all over the place that fit a certain criteria when it comes to sexual preference and race, and they're using diplomas as merit. I mean, there is a big difference between merit and competence and capability, and that's the issue. All these people have a lot of diplomas. That doesn't mean they are good or competent in what they're supposed to do. And then you have other people also. I don't have anything against trans people. Just don't try to force it upon other cultures or ourselves, and just live your life for what you are, and don't expect, being pushed up a ladder or some sort of a medal for being what you are. It's just something very personal, and needs to
Well,
stay
it
away
is
from
it is
politics.
very bizarre. It is very bizarre. And I'm gonna segue to Africa for a minute, because I think it's important that I have you on this to talk about foreign policy, because you do see it through the eyes of, not only as an American, but as a Guatemalan, and as a former leader of Guatemala's intelligence apparatus. So I think you have a really unique perspective here. But it was interesting when Sam Britton was like stealing clothing, and this lady from Africa, she said, "Oh my goodness, I saw him wearing my dresses," and they were like dresses that she had made because she's a fashion designer, so she was able to prove that he was actually wearing her dresses on a number of occasions. But then it segues right over to what we were talking about before we got on the show, and that was, now the White House is putting all of this pressure on Uganda.
Hmm.
Is it Uganda right now? I believe?
Yeah, it's Uganda, I think, because they
Yeah,
they
because
they
of the
outlawed.
LGBTQ. Yeah, they've outlawed that. So they're getting involved in other governmental affairs based on the cultural issues that are affecting that particular government. This isn't the only time they've done that. They've done that with Guatemala as well, haven't they?
Well, they have done a lot of things with different countries, right? And unfortunately, you know, I dare say this because we have seen it and we have enough, credible information and intelligence about it that we have collected throughout the years. Not only our intelligence here, but in other countries, is that since they cannot actually publicly force places like the Vatican to accept all this LGBTQ thing, they have been actually subverting priests all over the world, doing it, surreptitiously to make sure to push that agenda. And that's what we are seeing in Germany, right? all
Right.
these priests doing that. Now, the UN has been pushing all these other pet projects down the throats of small countries. Like here in Guatemala, they wanted to impose on us their vision of the fight against corruption, but it was their vision. And now you have, there's enough proof. And the worst part of it all is that the United States is even complicit into this because people that had enough problems with the law, that had a history of corruption, were put into places of influence and power inside our judicial system to persecute and fight against corruption. But they were some of the most corrupt actors in Guatemala, and the UN and the US embrace them. And that phrase about Patton comes to me. It's our SOB. He's an SOB, but he's our SOB, kind of like that, right?
Yeah,
These guys
right.
are corrupt, but they're our corrupt people. And now that they have, there are warrants for their arrest here in Guatemala, ample proof that they were actually doing pay for play with judicial cases. They were actually misusing money to buy overpriced, buildings for the institution, and they were getting kickbacks on that. Now suddenly they have political asylum in the United States. So what does that speak about? What does that
Talk
say about
about
the
that
United
in
States?
detail. Talk about that in detail about this group, because I think this is important. People really don't know that this is happening. It's really under the radar. I mean, Guatemala has been for a long time, and I spoke with President Giammattei, also President Jimmy Morales when he was in charge, and both presidents, both Guatemalan presidents have said, look, we want accountability for where money is going when it comes from the UN into our country and it's being fed into NGOs or non-governmental groups or in the international courts or in the makeup of whatever the UN wants to see happen here by pressure of State Department. And that became a real problem for some people in our own State Department. Not so much under President Trump at all, but
Well,
certainly under Obama's administration, under the Biden administration, Hillary Clinton. That
well,
was a huge issue when she was Secretary of State. Explain that a
so here's
little.
here's the worst part of it all. And you said it. It's all about transparency. And let's put the presidents of Guatemala outside. As Americans, how is our money
Right,
being used? Where is the transparency in all these projects? For instance, State
right.
Department to INL, their International Narcotics Law Enforcement. They have spent close to $1 billion in the last 10 years here, and there is no way they can account for every single cent they have misused because they have used it in pet projects that they give, and a lot of the money goes to their body. This network of NGOs, all body type of, all good boy type of network. They give them the money, a lot of that, millions at a time to NGOs, where their bodies are advisors or sit on the boards, and that money gets, put in there, and they use 80% of that money or more into salaries, and only 10 to 15% gets used actually in projects that really make a change. And then they boast out, oh, we have helped all these people, but there is no real change, obviously, because you still see a lot of people going, trying to get to the United States illegally. So
Right.
now, where is the return on that investment? How was our money used? I know for a fact that a lot of that money was actually used on publicity and advertising strategies to prop up this pet project of theirs, their famous CICIG, right? The Commission Against Impunity in Guatemala, that became really a political persecution tool of the left. I'm not saying that there is corruption. There is corruption in Guatemala. There is corruption in the United States, a lot of it. There is corruption in every single country in the world. But how come they were not persecuting corruption, across the board? No, they were focusing
Two tiers,
only
two
on,
tiers.
exactly. They were only focusing on, anything that damaged the conservative movement and the private sector, while you had all these other networks of people that have been working in academia, that have been, hiding inside the bureaucracy of Guatemala and the judicial system, and buying, and getting kickoffs or kickbacks from corrupt actors, and they were untouched. Now, so you had people that led our Attorney General's office, the former Attorney General, the former Special Investigator against Corruption, and and a lot of other people that actually were caught, the illegalities they committed here in Guatemala, close to human rights abuses and extra, how you call them, executions,
Extradition. Oh,
uh,
okay.
executions, and now they are being harbored by the United States. How is it that we are supposed to be a beacon of liberty and law enforcement and the rule of law when they are protecting criminals?
Why do you think they're protecting
Because
them?
because they were the corrupt ones, right? And probably there was a lot of abuses in our judicial system, and
Right.
at the end they were pushed by the U.S. Embassy to do it. I mean, some of these
Exactly.
and unfortunately to them, and eventually those things will become public. But there are some of them recorded things where they were getting pretty much instructions from the U.S. Embassy in Guatemala to do certain things that were just plainly legal.
Exactly. And this is the issue, right? This is my issue with what is happening across the board. I get there's government negotiations and departments like our intelligence apparatus that sometimes work at very covertly with other governments. And that is understandable to an extent. What I don't understand is how this government right now, how the Biden administration and even under the Obama administration
And unfortunately,
has handled,
during the Trump administration as
and
well,
Trump
because he
too.
wasn't able to, or he didn't have the time to clean out all the leftist bureaucracy in State Department and other institutions.
Right. So what happens to us, to our nations? Because I tell everybody all the time, even when I work on stories at the border, I'm not anti-immigrant at all. I'm a daughter of an immigrant. I speak Spanish. I love
We're
Latin
both are
countries. You
immigrants.
know that. I would move to Guatemala in a minute. I would love to have a house there and just, I love I just,
That's the funny thing.
it's
And your Cuban
my
accent
part of the
shows
world.
that you're in Guatemala.
This is my part of the world. I love this world. You know what I'm saying? Like, I love the Western Hemisphere. And I feel like we have single handedly started to destroy
Mhm.
what we could what could be the most potentially most beautiful, most envious part of the world. Like, the Guatemalan people are suffering. We can see what's happening in Ecuador right now, in Peru, in South America, all throughout South America, throughout Central America, with El Salvador right now, and Nicaragua and Honduras. Why are we? And Colombia, and then I'm gonna segue to China because I think that's just as important. But why is the U.S. policy just destroying any of our ability to really bring nearshoring to our hemisphere, to work together with our partners to create a great, prosperous nation? And I feel like we feed it so that the corruption continues instead of working together with our partners.
So the United States literally feeds corruption and narco terrorism by snorting, over 80% of the cocaine produced in the Western Hemisphere.
100%.
So why?
100%.
Here's the thing. The United States pushes countries like Guatemala, like El Salvador, like Panama to run all these counter narcotics operations, to use a lot of their military and law enforcement budgets into counter narcotics operations, especially mainly cocaine, and actually it's really cocaine, and so we use all this budget and all this money for a drug that is being consumed in the United States, not even here in America, Guatemala. I mean, Central America in general has,
Right.
we consume, the population is less than 0.0001% of the population that uses cocaine or any other hard drug. So everything else is being, snorted in the United States. And
So here's the thing.
you never see, here's the worst part of it all. You never see in the United States cartels being taken down, because last time I checked, cocaine doesn't arrive in the southern border in vending machines and people just go in and, put their $100 bill and get their half a gram, right? It's going all the way
I've
up
never
to New
seen that.
York.
If that happens, that's a problem.
Yeah, I know. It's landing in Florida. It's going all the way down to Seattle. It's, being used in California. How is it getting there? Where are the cartels distributing it? Where are the logistical parts? Where is and at the end, where's all that money because the cocaine, every time it changes hands, as it goes all the way up to the United States, it gets paid. It's not like, oh, United States, I'm gonna send you 10 tons of cocaine and you send me a wire in a month. No, it
Right.
changes every time it changes hands, money's paid. So when it's getting delivered to the final user, all those millions of dollars, billions of dollars being made per month on cocaine consumption, where is that money? Where is it being laundered? Why
Right,
don't we see the
exactly.
United States a real war on drugs and this type of stuff?
I agree with you. It's a multi-pronged effort. It has to be, or we're never going to be able to get anywhere with this. We have allowed, and I'm talking about the United States, and I'm also talking about other governments that have become embroiled in it just because it's become a part of the whole ecosystem. Like we've created a whole ecosystem of narcotics, of a narcotics world, right?
Yeah.
Where we can't even separate ourselves from the monsters that we actually created. I remember when I used to be in Afghanistan, right?
Oh,
And people would talk about Pakistan all the time and say, well, the Pakistanis created the Haqqani network. They created the Taliban as their tiger to fight India. You know what I mean? But once you create that tiger, you can't control the tiger. The tiger does whatever it wants. The tiger can attack India when you want it to, and then it turns around and attacks your school with all your children in the military school, and then you have 200 and something children dead, at the hands of your tiger, which is
and
what happened in Pakistan many times. I think that's what we've done here.
yeah,
But
and
you and I both know that we can clean this up. You and I both know the capabilities, me covering intelligence and military for all these years, you working in the intelligence community, you and I both know that if we wanted to take out these snakes and just destroy them, mean take over their funding, take out their leadership, really do something spectacular, we could. A lot more than just arresting Chapo Guzman and putting him in the Supermax while the rest of his gang runs
so here's the
Sinaloa.
thing. So let's mention Chapo Guzman or any of the big narco bosses of Mexico and the world. They all get captured because they own the networks outside the United States. Think about it. Who is the Chapo of the United States? Who holds the strings on all the distribution lines of cocaine and drugs in the United States? Who
Give
is
me
it?
his number and I'll call him for an
No,
interview.
I know,
No,
but who is it? I mean,
I
someone
don't
is
know.
doing it. It's not something,
Right.
systemic just happening. Someone is leading the drug distribution in the United
You're
States,
absolutely
and no
right.
one is demanding. I mean, why is
What
it not we the people need to demand? Well, guys, let's focus on the cartels at home.
Right. I absolutely agree with you. Let's segue there because I think the cartels and now we have this complex like system where we also have the NGOs and we just talked about it a little bit, but where the NGOs are not only getting the money and you talked very eloquently and you stated it flatly like where is this money going? We don't have accountability for it, but we have NGOs that are actually assisting in the movement of migrants in our hemisphere in such a way that it's harming not just the United States, not just our nation, Mario, but every other nation that is in the process of trying to it's taking people out of Guatemala, it's moving people out of Honduras, it's moving people out of El Salvador, Ecuador, it doesn't matter where they're at, they're heading towards the US. And now we see a huge influx from China, as well as other nations coming through the Darien Gap in Panama and going through Guatemala and I heard landing in Ecuador and then coming through. What is your assessment of what some of these NGOs are doing? Like, do you think that they're working for people that are targeting the US and our hemisphere?
No, it's they are being funded by the United States to damage the United States. That's the worst part of it all. And you saw it with your own eyes and your camera crews. You saw
Right.
the small narcos handing out money from the NGOs that got money from USAID, and that money that will actually pay for the immigrants to keep trekking and keep pushing all the way up goes back through consulting fees and donations back to groups like the Seattle Foundation, and suddenly Seattle Foundation has a lot of money to give out to the campaigns of different Democrats. That's the real network of NGOs and the entire thing with immigrants. So it's two circles of convenience. One's for campaign money that comes back to the United States already laundered, and then a lot of new voters for them because oh we help bring you into the United States, right? So it's really
Right.
a Machiavellian strategic, kind of midterm, long-term type of plan for them because they need to secure a new base of voters because they're losing the rest of the minorities that are already in the United States. They see what they really are about. They care more about, pushing down, LGBTQ policies instead of taking care of the people that don't have a roof or a plate of food in the United States, living under underpasses in freeways and in the boondocks all over the place in the South, right? What about
Yeah,
our people?
sometimes
What
it's
about our people that were born there? What about our kids? Well, why don't
right.
we take care first of our kids that are our responsibility in the United States before we panel to the needs of some multimillionaire gay guy down south or in Africa because he needs to feel protected to be able to actually go into a kindergarten and look at kids with weird eyes. So
That is that I can understand because that is really what is frustrating so many parents. I mean, part of the big thing that's happening here and you're absolutely right. There is an enormous frustration and anger with parents that are like, "Look, I'm so tired of you trying to get me to say that it's okay to take my kid to some kind of cross-dressing parade or whatever. You could do whatever you want. I just don't want my kids exposed to that. I want to be able to raise my children the way they want, the way I see fit, the way I want to see them raised." And right now, even in the United States, Kevin McCarthy has a Parents' Bill of Rights that just came before the Congress. So that is something that I agree with you on. But as far as the NGOs are concerned, I also understand where you're coming from, that it's coming back to the United States, but I also see a huge influence as well with US leftist regimes,
mhm,
with US, I would not say allies, but adversaries or leftist regimes utilizing this with the UN, United Nations,
mhm.
utilizing these NGOs for their own political purposes, either to sway political sentiment in Central America or to create some kind of social breakup or problem for our nations. And
So
we've seen
basically,
that.
they want to create failed states. That's what they need to, because at the end they need a global government. So they have all this good old boy network of NGOs because obviously they're going to make money at it, not only going to push
Right.
a specific agenda and their propaganda, but really their aim is to create failed states or get states to fail so that the UN can come in. Oh, wait, we are going to direct your country and we're going to, fix it for you because you obviously can't. It's very arrogant for people that really have never, like I said, really held a serious job or create any type of value for the world and their human and their fellow humans. They just
Right.
work, studied and work for themselves. That's it. And
And they don't really understand the world. A lot of these
they're not
people,
accountable
which
to
is so
anyone. That's the
fascinating,
worst part of it all.
have never traveled or spent time in other parts of the world, and they're coming up with policies that are completely antithetical to what would actually work in the nations that they are actually covering. Like whether they're at the State Department office desk for Central America or whatever, if they haven't been there, if they haven't experienced, if they don't know the culture, they don't even understand the first step in what it takes to kind of solve these solutions, in my opinion. I wanted to ask you about, some of the money laundering because you hit on it. Part of I think one of the biggest stories that came out in the last few years is the fact that China is actually laundering a lot of the money
Mhm.
for the cartels. So not only does China assist the cartels in the production of narcotics, and now we're seeing that even with xylazine coming into the US. And yes, the United States has a huge, massive problem with addiction. But we also have, like, I believe, like you said, like we have a lot of factors working against us too. Not only is our government not doing its job to protect the American people from addiction, but it's like fall coming through from every corridor, even from our adversaries. And our children are now facing poisonings. And I think that's what's a little different than the fentanyl between fentanyl and cocaine. I was thinking about that as we were talking about it. over 100,000 opioid deaths, 60% of which were fentanyl. Now we've got all these pills all over our streets, these counterfeit pills that aren't real. They're not Adderall, they're not Percocet, they're not oxycodone. Nobody thinks they're going to die by taking one of these pills, and then they take it
Mhm.
and all of a sudden they're dead because it was counterfeit. But the Chinese are laundering this money,
Mhm.
Mario. I mean, they're laundering it for these cartels, and we basically have no access to it. It's kind of like a brilliant system of washing the money through Chinese banking systems because we can't even access them in the United States.
And that's the whole thing, right? Because think about it. So there is a lot of drugs, legal drugs that are being counterfeited, and that's what, the cartels are pushing to a lot of people in the United States and what's killing them. I remember a group of pharmaceutical companies that, started screaming about countries not wanting to force the COVID vaccine on their populations. And they pushed the big governments and the UN to force these small countries. How come they are not doing the same and trying to push the US government and others to, fight the cartels and make sure that they are not counterfeiting my drugs because someone else is making money out of those drugs? Think about it.
Right.
So, so there is what's going on there. Why are not they really pushing the government to fight the counterfeiting of those drugs? Because the pharmaceuticals are losing money. Now, if you go back to
Right.
the money laundering, again, consumption, right? It's people are paying cash for all these drugs, and someone is getting it, and there are billions of dollars a month in the United States.
Right.
Where is it going? Where is it being put? It's not being sent back to Mexico and Guatemala and Honduras and all the way to Colombia and then whatever. It's being laundered somewhere in the United States as a, let's put it, they collect it and somehow, flush it out of the US, launder it and push it back into the economy. Who is
Right.
doing that? And again, like you said, it's only a state like an antagonic state like China that can do it.
Right.
So there is
And I
there
that
must be some
and you know what,
component
that
to it.
just raises so many other questions. I think I'm gonna ask you a few more before I let you go because I'm gonna be
Okay,
bringing you back on all the time, and I'm gonna be heading to Guatemala, and I wanna do the podcast from your podcast studio
awesome.
at home in Guatemala. It's gonna
That's
be
right.
amazing, but I wanna ask you this. You mentioned how some of these NGOs are laundering, like, political money
Mhm.
down in Central America, and this is something that I've talked about openly. I believe that is happening. I believe the UN and other groups are funneling taxpayer dollars into these NGOs. The UN is the main one, into these NGOs. These NGOs then are, shuffling people along this path to the United States, and this money is also ending up in the pockets as well of people here running for political office and such through donations. Or talk a little bit about that, because that's kind of, I think, I don't know if it's easy for people to wrap that around their heads. Maybe it is for all of you out there that are listening to Mario, but I just want to make sure that we understand that, because I think I need to investigate this even more.
So let's put it like this: there is only so much money. Uh, Governments, donor governments can send to their preferred implementation partners. That's what they call them here all over the world, really. Their preferred implementation partners. So that's the good old boy network of leftist NGOs that push all these weird agendas, that are the ones, organizing and helping and transporting illegal immigrants towards the United States from all over the world. So there's only so much money that they can send them. So, but they're also getting a lot of money donated to them from weird banking systems. Obviously, they are complicit into that. And unfortunately, even churches of all denominations are participating in that as well. There's a lot of churches all over the Western Hemisphere getting donations from uh, foundations out of Hong Kong and out of Singapore and all these Asian countries very linked to China or controlled by China. and they are then taking out that money. The moment they get into a bank here in Latin America, owned by an NGO, it's pretty much clean money because most of the laws around the world don't really look into those transactions because it's it's a feel good thing. How would I dare look into the banking transactions of a do good NGO, right? So that's your perfect money laundering scheme. Then they take the money out and they already, oh, well, I'm an NGO. I can use this money for whatever I want. I will funnel it to another foundation here that is doing good. And suddenly that foundation is owned by a cartel or by a politician who then gives the cash out to his people. And his people are really, cartels and narcos and stuff like that.
Yeah. So by the time it even if it ends up in Central America, even if it ends up in the United States, even if it ends up in the hands of a politician there or here or a narco, it's already been so washed that by the time it gets there, it's almost impossible to find out where it originated, except for the person that originated or the country that originated it, right? Because they could see exactly where it's going. I mean, if I was China and I'm saying, like, okay, I want to make sure this $25 million ends up in the hands of this charity in an effort to move this many people towards I mean, I could do that. I could see that. I mean, it might not be playing out perfectly, but it'll definitely go to my plan. That's brilliant.
And again, it's brilliant, but it's evil as well, right? And think about
Right.
it.
It's
How much money is
absolutely
being
evil.
made of that everyone gets a cut, and there is enough money to make sure that the banking systems of all these countries don't look into them. Think
Right.
about it. So there is another component of corruption there to make sure that the laws stay in place as they are, and no system looks into those transactions. And again, and this gives you talked about a tiger, and that's kind of like our own problem, right? So we feed these tigers, and that's what we started doing with China. We started feeding the Chinese tiger, sending them all this manufacturing towards them, and now it has become a dragon, and the dragon has turned on us. No little, you remember that saying from the Romans, the Draco at portas, the dragon is at the gate. Well, the dragon is
Yeah.
already flying over us, no pun intended with the balloons, but it really is. And the dragon is ready to start, fighting and throwing the real balls of fire towards the United States. And it's not innuendo. It's a real war. They're already here. Chinese don't have all the limitations that the U.S. has imposed on itself to actually do business in the region. They pay money under the table to politicians, to governments. They
Yeah, we
open the
even
doors
saw
to
with
them.
Eric Swalwell. We even saw with Eric Swalwell,
Oh
you
yeah,
know, his
Farquhar.
connections to Fang Fang.
Yeah.
I'm not, that's just one example of something that became public.
Well,
That
also
happens all the
the
time.
Madame,
Dianne
Anthony
Feinstein.
from California. Yeah, yeah. Her driver was also a Chinese spy.
Right,
So
right.
and again, and so Chinese are just very aggressive. They're becoming more aggressive, and no one is pushing back other than small countries that really don't want them here because we can. For instance, that's the example that I give all the time. What happened to Costa Rica? Costa Rica, a very nice country,
Mhm.
very prosperous country, safe in a lot of ways, and they made this deal, this how you call it,
Belt
trade
and like
agreement
with
with
the triangle.
China,
Yeah.
and it was vis-a-vis going to be a balanced trade agreement. And what happened is that China flooded the Costa Rican market with their products and literally destroyed the manufacturing industry in Costa Rica. So
Mhm.
what happened with all those people that are now without jobs, right? And Costa
Right.
Rica, obviously, they found other ways to, they put a lot of money into tourism and things like that, and they kind of offset that problem. But other countries that don't have those, all those advantages that Costa Rica had, if they give out to China, China is going to destroy their production and create a new army of poor people, people in need, and obviously, who's going to use them? All these NGOs that need them in the United States as new voters.
I think that's exactly what they're doing. And I'm going to bring you back on, Mario, to talk about more of this, because this is probably one of the most fascinating podcasts I've done in so long, because I agree with you. I believe the dragon is already here.
Mhm.
I thought that was just a really brilliant way of putting it. And I believe that we are not paying attention, that we're sleeping while the dragon is prowling around, in a way. And we are not really focused on what could potentially happen and how the world could potentially change in the next few years. I'm not talking even about 10 years down the road. I'm talking the next few years if we don't address this problem.
Think about it. So
So
think about it from the national security perspective, and this is the criminal, blindness of the government, the United States government, when it comes towards China in the region. Let's say that China invades Taiwan in a couple of years or whenever, and China is going to install a lot of military capabilities in the countries that are friendly to them here in the hemisphere. So they are going to be ready to, push back on the United States militarily if we try to defend a country like Taiwan. So
exactly.
this government is allowing China to set up a situation where even the people are going to say, well, don't defend Taiwan because these guys might end up, throwing missiles at us from, I don't know, Honduras, Nicaragua, Cuba, whatever, Venezuela, Colombia very soon probably too. So that's the thing. So they are setting up
No,
a
and
situation where we, the people, are going to end up having to, accept it because otherwise we will have a real, national security threat, and stuff being thrown at us.
it may be that by the time we recognize it, it might be too late.
Yep,
That's pretty scary to
absolutely.
think about.
We're very
Thank you,
close.
Mario.
It was a
Thank
pleasure,
you for
Carl.
being a part of the show. You're awesome,
Thank
my
you.
good friend. It was great having Mario on, and I plan on bringing Mario Duarte back on the show to discuss spies in Central America. I think that would be an excellent follow up to what we talked about today. But before I wrap this up, I want to tell you about My Pillow. I love My Pillow. I love their products. I love the fact that this is an American company that cares about you, the American public. And right now you can get 85% off. This is with my special code, 85% off all season slippers. And if you guys don't have these all season slippers by My Pillow, you do not know what you are missing. They are so comfortable and so wonderful to wear, and they're great in the winter, they're great in the summer. You can have them, you can pack them up and save them for gifts coming up. For Christmas will be just around the corner, trust me. And you can save them. You can save them in your closet. And right now, you can't even get them any cheaper than this, 85% off. So this sale will not last long. So hurry up to shopmypillow.com during the all season slipper closeout sale. Like I said, great in winter, great in summer, fall, spring, it doesn't matter. These slippers are the best. You can get the all season slipper right now for only $25 with promo code Carter. You cannot get cheaper than that, folks. CARTER while supplies last. Also, check out My Pillow's new products, including the My Mattress Topper 2.0 and the My Pillow 2.0 at mypillow.com. Promo code Carter. That's mypillow.com. Promo code Carter. That's mypillow.com. Promo code Carter. It was so great having you here with me. I can't wait to get back to you on the next podcast. Follow me on Truth at Sara Carter Official, on Twitter at Sara Carter DC, and on Instagram at SCarterDC. God bless you. God bless our great nation, and God bless the state of Texas.